There cannot be good without evil. One in effect helps to define the other. And so it's no surprise that when we turn to superhero comics, this very real concept gets adapted to some of the best, brightest, and kindest heroes around. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Join me today as we count down the top 10 superheroes with evil personas. Number 10, Iron Man. I know that Iron Man has saved and helped to save the Earth and universe many times over, but even he has a darker side. This version of Iron Man was known as Superior Iron Man, and this persona took hold following the events of Axis, when basically everyone's dark side was brought to the surface as major heroes and villains of Marvel had their alignments flipped. Thanks, by accident, to Scarlet Witch. Well, Scarlet Witch was actually trying to do something good, and she did do that, but this just kinda happened as a result. Oh, Wanda, always with the magic and the chaos. When everything was set right once more, however, Iron Man managed to shield himself from the reversal back to his original alignment, being the smart and evil man that he was at the time. And so for a while thereafter, he got to continue being evil in his series, Superior Iron Man. Number 9, The Flash. Usually we see the Flash as a hero, especially the current Flash, Wally West, except for the time when, for some reason, it was felt that he should play a villain instead. As in Heroes in Crisis, where Wally basically snapped due to the universe being reset with New 52 and him remembering the previous continuity, his family, and his own place in it. Now granted, this wasn't specifically a persona of Wally's, more just a breaking point for the hero that briefly turned him into a villain. But in Future State we did see a darker side to the character explored once more when he becomes one of the Four Horsemen and is possessed by the entity known as Famine. As Famine, Wally even preys on other speedsters, and seemingly succeeds in breaking their connection to the Speed Force, and even killing a good number of them, and in the end, kind of all of them. I mean, he turns Barry into a ghost. Fortunately, Future State is now basically an alternate world, an alternate future, and this aspect of it will likely not come to pass in the main continuity, which means Wally is free to get his family back and keep being the good guy that we know him to be. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this channel and you want to support us in other ways, you can go and check out our Facebook. We just relaunched ourselves over there and it is awesome, so head on over, hit that like, helps us out. Thank you. Number 8, Homelander. Homelander might be one of the main villains of The Boys, both the comic series and television adaptation, but he's also somehow still not the worst of the worst, if you can believe that. He poses as a hero but is really not the greatest, but that being said, he also has an evil clone who is much worse than he is. In fact, many of the most terrible acts that we associate with Homelander in the comics are revealed to have been acts committed by his evil clone version. Well, I don't think the television series plans to follow suit in this regard. In the comics, this evil clone of himself turns out to be Black Noir, whose face we never see, and in the television series, whose voice we never hear. And even in the comics, he's known for being very quiet. So not only does Homelander have the false hero persona that he often wears in front of the public, but he also has a much darker yet separate side in his evil clone, Black Noir. And I would say in comparison to Black Noir, Homelander is basically a superhero because Black Noir is literally the worst in the comics. It's really bad. Number 7, Moon Knight. Moon Knight is known for being a hero or anti-hero in the Marvel Universe, but unfortunately, there's a lot going on in his mind, which means he hasn't always acted as a hero. In fact, the being that granted him his power may also be his dark side, or bring out a dark side in Moon Knight, or Mark Spector at least. It has been insinuated before that Khonshu is another persona residing within Mark Spector's psyche, who is somewhat of a manipulator, but in some ways represents Mark's lack of control or desire to self-sabotage. However, even if we consider what presently seems more likely, that Khonshu is of course his own separate entity, Khonshu was also the one who almost succeeded in using Moon Knight to turn the Earth into his own underworld, having Moon Knight steal artifacts of power from the Avengers to use them to defeat Mephisto, but only so that Khonshu might reign in his place. Yikes. Moon Knight's dark persona has a name, and it is, or was at least, Khonshu. Number 6. Red Hood. Jason Todd is a character who is familiar with darkness. He has suffered through quite a bit of trauma and tragedy, and as a result it shaped his character, corrupting him somewhat and turning him dark. Initially, Jason Todd was known as Batman's second Robin, but over time he became more and more rebellious and eventually chose to basically break off and set it on his own. This only led to more problems when Jason found his birth mother, but then was seemingly betrayed by her and then brutally killed by the Joker. and all of that after shortly reconnecting with Batman. Ooh. Years later we would learn that he had returned, but feeling that Batman had abandoned him after his suspected death, became the villain known as Red Hood, breaking the rules of heroism that Batman had taught him. Jason to this day is always a character who struggles to find the light at times on a path of darkness that he treads. And even when acting as a hero, there is a darkness within him that seems to linger, and at times even comes to the surface. Number 5. Professor X. Even someone as celebrated as Professor X has a dark side, and actually, the more we've gotten to know him, the more this makes quite a bit of sense. The darker and darker it seems to have gotten for Professor X. One of the first major revelations when it came to Professor X's dark side was with the villain Onslaught. Onslaught initially was this mysterious psychic villain in the comics who, despite seeming like a mashup of Magneto and Professor X when it came to his abilities and his appearance, everyone was still surprised to find out that he in fact was a mashup of Magneto and Professor X. Gasp! More specifically, Onslaught represents the repressed darker parts of Charles' psyche, which he kinda locked away but later were released when he broke Magneto's mind, in essence absorbing it. Although at the time, I don't think he really knew he did that. Magneto's mind connected with Charles' darker side, and Onslaught was born. And really, this was just the beginning of readers learning about the darker aspects of Charles Xavier, which overall I think adds quite a bit of depth to his character. Number 4. Enchantress. Enchantress is an interesting one. I feel like we generally think of her as more of a villain, but she's definitely way more complicated than that. To be clear, we're talking about the Enchantress of DC, aka June Moon. June Moon became the Enchantress initially in the comics after being given magical power by a being known as Zamor. In reality, this power was granted to June Moon by merging her with an evil entity known as the Succubus. With her newfound power, she would transform into a green-eyed, raven-haired woman whenever she activated her abilities, transforming back to the blonde-haired, blue-eyed June Moon thereafter. At least initially back in the New Earth continuity, June actually acted as a hero in her Enchantress guise, defeating evil and saving her paramour's life. Unfortunately, she quickly became more anti-hero in terms of her adventures and motives, and then just basically became like straight up villainous from there. At times it has seemed Enchantress struggles when it comes to her alignment. Sometimes she would act heroically, but on a dime she would turn to the side of evil with her behavior. This is because of the struggle within her likely between the Succubus and June in terms of their own desires. Or, in Prime Earth continuity, the struggle between June and Enchantress, who is simply her own magical entity who is merged with June. Number 3. Phoenix. Phoenix is probably one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe, which is also what makes their dark side so terrifying. When Phoenix turns dark, you want to watch out, because this is a hero who isn't just going to mess up a situation, a country, a continent. This is a character who has the power to destroy whole worlds as they please. Typically when we talk about Phoenix and Dark Phoenix, we are talking about Jean Grey, who is most well known for her bond to the Phoenix Force, and merging with the entity and then taking up the mantle of Phoenix, turning dark, and then sacrificing herself to save others from basically the darkness within her. Of course, later on this was retconned to actually be a sort of Phoenix-made copy of Jean, while she herself was resting at the bottom of a bay, in a sort of recovery pod. But no matter who becomes the Phoenix host, it seems evident that this is an entity that is so powerful that most, even likely heroes like Jean, would be at risk for turning to the side of evil and becoming corrupted by its power. Number 2. Raven. Raven is a hero who very evidently has a dark side. It comes from her father's side. Trigon is both a powerful demon and Raven's dad, and the darkness within herself she gets from him. And I think he also could be an alien. I think that's also one of his origins. Evil alien. He sired many offspring with the hopes of spreading his power and his mission of destruction, because he was trapped at the time. His goal was to, in essence, destroy worlds with his children, who likely all felt a pull towards darkness, because they're his children, Raven included. Raven is therefore typically depicted as being a hero who is somewhat monotone, due to the fact that she needs to keep her emotions in check. This is because if she gets too emotional, it can actually cause her dark side to emerge and take control of her. So instead, everything she does, says, and feels must be controlled and calculated so that she doesn't wake the monster that sleeps within herself. And we've seen what happens in the comics when Raven's dark side does take control, and let me tell you, it's pretty scary stuff. Fun fact, I'm pretty sure Wally West is like scarred for life from Raven's dark side. Number 1. Sentry. Sentry's evil persona was so bad that he in effect had to be wiped from the minds of everyone on planet Earth, including his own mind. The Sentry is the greatest superhero the world forgot in Marvel Comics, and the world had to forget him because Bob Reynolds wasn't just the Sentry, but was also one of the greatest and most powerful villains to have ever lived. The Void. With the realization that they too were one and the same, the only way the heroes who knew this figured they could defeat the Void without killing Reynolds, who was a close friend to many of them, was to simply make sure that everyone forgot who the Sentry was, allowing Robert to also forget, and in essence preserving the good deeds as well that he had done, even though no one of course would remember who he was. And without the extreme good of the Sentry, there would also no longer exist the extreme evil of the Void. Problem solved. For a time this worked and Bob went back to being a regular old Joe, forgetting about his previous life, but one day he began to remember again, which allowed the Sentry to return but also brought the Void back with him. And that's also when we found out who he was, because we also forgot, us readers. Oh, retcons. That's actually a really fun retcon though, I do like that one. Do you like it when superheroes have a darker side to counterbalance the goodness in them, or do you find it untoward when they do, or simply illogical? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below when it comes to heroes who have a darker side. I personally am usually here for that. If people can be that complex in real life, you know, not really heroes, not really villains, I think superheroes can be too. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.